Mysterious creatures, parasites, have infiltrated the Earth. Their sole task, the annihilation of humanity. They consume the brain, then replace the head and control the body, enabling them to feed on other humans. Some parasites devour the families and friends of their hosts. Izumi Shinichi was lucky. When a parasite attempted to infiltrate his head, he was listening to music on headphones. The parasite then tried to enter the brain through the bloodstream via his hand, but Shinichi cut off circulation with the headphone wire. This forced the creature to remain in his hand. Shinichi tried to inform his parents, but they didn't believe him. The next morning, as he descended for breakfast, his hand seemed numb. On the way to school, it began to act on its own. He inadvertently grabbed his classmate's chest, deeply offending her. This was just the beginning of the extraordinary events. Shinichi saved the girl's life by stopping a car from hitting her. At home, he verified if his hand truly belonged to him. When he attempted to stab it, it transformed into a shapeless, speaking entity. It struggled to communicate, so Shinichi couldn't interrogate it. After this incident, his appetite increased, though he used to eat little. His parents even suspected illness. Meanwhile, the city witnessed gruesome murders attributed to a killer dubbed Butcher. One morning, Shinichi woke up to find his right hand had turned into a parasite. Studying books, it revealed it was supposed to devour Izumi's brain but failed. Now, as it grew, it would have to live in place of his right hand. On the way to school, the parasite sensed another of its kind despite Shinichi's protests. It insisted they find it. The other parasite inhabited a dog's body and attacked Izumi. His right hand had to kill the creature. Meanwhile, parasites continued to capture more people. One of them saved a girl from rapists, but when they sought revenge, he killed them, saving the girl again. In gym class, Shinichi reconciled with Murano, which displeased Miji. Miji, as Shinichi's right hand now identified itself, didn't like the idea of Shinichi dating Murano, so it decided to confront Izumi. Miji began to beat him up, but Shinichi's right hand replied affirmatively, causing Izumi to flee in fear. Now calling himself Miji, meaning right hand, the parasite sensed they were being followed on a busy street. They retreated to an empty lot, and the pursuer followed. Seeing Miji hadn't taken over the host's head, the pursuer proposed merging their bodies to become stronger and live longer. However, Miji refused, unsure of surviving in a new body without a host. Miji severed the pursuer's head, who died as a result. After this incident, Shinichi went to a cafe with Murano, and on their way back, they saw hooligans tormenting a kitten. Shinichi intervened, freeing the poo animal and driving off the bullies. In Murano's eyes, he became a hero. That same night, Tamiya and Mr. A conceived a child. Their bodies were also taken over by parasites, and Izumi worries that he can tell anyone what happened to him. Moreover, he and Miji know that the butcher killer is an extraterrestrial parasite. Meanwhile, Shinichi's parents begin to suspect that something is wrong with Izumi. He seems different, transformed. On the way to school, Miji senses a very powerful parasite. Upon arriving at school, they're informed of a new teacher, Reiko Tamura. Shinichi realizes she's the parasite they sensed. Reiko notices Shinichi's and Miji's presence. She decides their symbiotic relationship is quite unusual and sets up a meeting outside of school. There, they can talk peacefully. Tommy arrives with Mr. A, who doesn't like Shinichi. He believes he should be killed, along with Miji, since he failed to take over the host's head. Driven to madness, he returns to school, and Mr. A senses they're there for him. The principal announces an evacuation due to an intruder. Mr. A has already killed several teachers. Miji plans to use other students as a shield and then kill Mr. A while he's occupied with them. However, Shinichi disagrees and barricades himself in a deserted corridor. Together with Miji, they devise a new battle plan, with Izumi assisting the parasite. Miji cuts off a chair leg and gives it to Shinichi as a weapon. Mr. A jumps into the corridor from the lower floor, but with no escape for Shinichi and Izumi, the confined space works in their favor. While Miji fights Mr. A, Izumi slowly approaches. He hides the chair leg in his trousers, and when they are within striking distance, Shinichi thrusts the weapon into Mr. A's chest. Mr. A didn't expect this turn of events. He starts to bleed and, to avoid death, pushes the chair leg deeper and flees. Shinichi doesn't pursue him. He doesn't want to become a killer. Mr. A can't believe he was defeated by a mere human. He needs to transfer to a new body to survive. He finds his way to a laboratory where Reiko Tamura is hiding. But when he enters, Tamiya jumps out of the window, detonating an oxygen cylinder. Shortly after this incident, life returned to normal. At school, it was revealed that Reiko was expecting a child. When questioned, she refused to answer and simply resigned, leaving the school. She intended to kill Shinichi since she no longer needed to hide. However, after talking to him, she changed her mind. She was certain that Izumi was changing because of the symbiosis with the parasite and wanted to see where it would lead. When Reiko returned home, her mother visited her. Tamiya tried to deceive her, but her mother realized it wasn't her daughter. She had to kill her. Shinichi's parents decided to go on vacation, but Izumi was against it. If he wasn't with them, a parasite could kill them. However, Niji advised him to let them go far away from big cities, where the chance of a parasite attack was lower. Shinichi told his parents he wouldn't object to their trip, and they set off for vacation. On a country road, a car accident occurred. The man driving was distracted, and his companion, who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, flew through the windshield and died. It turned out she was a parasite. When her body died, she severed the man's head and took over his body. But controlling it was difficult. The parasite needed a female body it was more accustomed to. On the way home, Shinichi saw a fight in an alley and intervened. Niji was asleep at that moment, so Izumi had to handle the fix himself. They beat him, but he didn't give up. Kana Kimishima, who was there, told her again to stop him. She looked into Shinichi's eyes and saw something frightening. His defense of Nagai at school had gained him respect, but Mitsuo's gang decided to teach him a lesson. When he tried to free Murano, Niji was ready to intervene and kill the thugs, but Izumi restrained him. Nagai helped him, and the school kids taught the villains a lesson. Afterward, Kana approached Shinichi to talk. She began to suspect that he was hiding something. Niji said that Kana sensed his parasite, which was searching for a female body to transfer into. They found a married couple, who turned out to be Shinichi's parents. His father had survived the encounter with a parasite, but managed to call his son and inform him that his mother had turned into a monster. Later, Nobuka returned home, but Shinichi refused to believe that his mother had been taken over by a parasite. She used this opportunity to impale him. Niji had to transfer into Izumi's body to heal his wound. When he woke up, Shinichi felt different. His vision had improved, and he felt changed. Niji had also changed. Now, he needed to sleep for 4 hours a day to fully recover his strength. Shinichi received a call from a hospital informing him that his father was alive. He decided to go to him. A local girl, whose mother rented rooms to guests, advised him to stay with them. He convinced his father that the monster that killed his wife was just a hallucination. In reality, Nobuka was alive, as she had been seen at the hotel where the couple stayed. However, Shinichi knew what his mother had become, so he decided to keep watch over his father at the hospital to prevent her from killing him. He was sure she would come for him, and Izumi wanted to destroy the monster that killed his mother. Finally, Niji sensed a parasite nearby, and Shinichi chased after it. He had become stronger and faster. He even managed to jump over a high wall at the beach. At that moment, Niji realized that somehow he had changed his host. Shinichi was certain that the parasite who took over his mother's body was on the beach. He wanted to kill it but mistook Izumi for the parasite. He met a man named Mamoru Udo, who, like Shinichi, was a host for a parasite. However, the parasite only took control of part of his body and head but didn't touch his brain. The parasite attacked him when Mamoru was in despair and wanted to end his life. He fell off a cliff, and the parasite inside him had to save him. As a result, it didn't have the chance to consume his brain. Izumi and Mamoru didn't fight because they were very similar. Shinichi even told his new acquaintance his story, and Judas promised to help. He lived near the hospital where Izumi's father was, and if the killer of his mother appeared there, Judas would inform Shinichi. When Izumi and Miji were alone, the parasite revealed how it changed the host's body to heal its wounds. It split into tiny particles that spread throughout the body and couldn't return. Because of this, Shinichi became stronger and faster. He stopped being himself. Part of him was replaced by Miji's molecules. Mamoru Udo did indeed discover the parasite that killed Izumi's mother. He informed Shinichi about it, and they ran to the agreed place. However, Miji fell asleep on the way, leaving them Izumi's blade as a weapon. However, he still couldn't bring himself to kill his mother. He loved her too much and was afraid to harm her body. Mamoru helped him a minute earlier. He fought the parasite, and she wounded him. Now, he struck her from behind and severed her head. After that, Shinichi returned home with his father. At the same time, Tamiya asked one of her associates to follow him. She was curious about how Shinichi's organism was developing in symbiosis with Miji. But Izumi is not only being watched by Reiko's ally. Kana is also interested in him. She feels him but can't explain her ability. Mitsuo, Kana's friend, secretly loves her. He notices that Shinichi receives a lot of attention from her and decides to confront him. Once, he tried to beat him, but this time, he failed. Izumi became stronger and easily defeated his opponent. At that moment, Satomi Murano noticed them. Shinichi invited her for a walk, but she couldn't shake off the feeling that he had changed after visiting his father in the hospital. After some time, she found evidence of this. Izumi felt a puppy hit by a car on the road. It was beyond saving, so he picked it up to let it die peacefully. Morena was with him, but when Shinichi threw the puppy into the trash after its death, she realized he was a stranger to her. They argued, and Izumi realized he should have acted differently. He buried the puppy under a tree. Soon after, he met Hideo Shimada at school. It was his Reiko's order to monitor Shinichi. He made it clear he didn't want to kill people. He just needed to study them. Hideo was handsome, which immediately attracted the attention of girls, especially Yuko. She began to secretly spy on him and even drew him in a notebook. Yuko felt Hideo's presence but couldn't understand why, and she previously only sensed blades. She told him about this ability, but Izumi warned her not to approach people if she felt them from a distance. He knew that Kana could detect parasite waves and that they could kill her. However, Kana didn't listen to him. She felt the presence of a parasite again and thought it was Izumi, but it turned out to be Hideo. At that moment, Mitsuo appeared and defended his friend. Hideo had to take him to a deserted place and teach him a lesson. People from the police came to Shinichi. They explained to him that he shouldn't tell anyone that a parasite had decapitated his wife. Otherwise, there would be panic. Authorities are currently looking for a way to identify these monsters, so they need to keep silent until they find it. But he didn't listen to them and told everything to his son. Izumi wasn't surprised. He calmly listened to his father, but didn't mention that there was also a parasite living in his hand. Meanwhile, Yuka began to suspect that something was wrong with Hideo. She followed him and found out that he had inhuman abilities. Yuka guessed that Hideo was one of the parasites that the police were looking for. Her brother told her about them. He drew a monster according to Shinichi's description. However, Yuka didn't rush to hand Hideo over to the police. First, she wanted to talk to him. She invited him to meet in one of the school classrooms and took acid with her. When Hideo arrived, he confessed that he was no longer human, and then began to transform into a monster. Miji sensed this and informed Shinichi. When Hideo tried to attack Yuko, the acid got on his face, and he couldn't turn back into a human. He wanted to kill Yuko, but she escaped through the window and jumped to the ground. She was noticed by the students from the sports ground, and they went to see what was happening. In the corridor, they met the teacher and went to Hideo together, but he killed everyone. Miji and Shinichi decided it would be wiser to evacuate from the school with everyone and let the police deal with the monster. But when they were outside, Shinichi recognized Miranda's class. He got scared for his friend and rushed inside. Here, he saw how the students from her class ran out, but Morina wasn't among them. Izumi and Miji went to look for her. Meanwhile, Hideo was killing the students from her class in the corridor, but Morina survived. She was hiding with two classmates. When Shinichi approached, the students were scared of him and avoided him. They thought he was also a monster since he didn't get scared of the bloody bodies in the corridor. Hideo was waiting for them around the corner. He killed them, and Izumi grabbed Morina and jumped out the window with her. Once they were at a safe distance from the school, he left her and decided to act. At that moment, the police entered the school, but Hideo easily killed them. Shinichi understands that he is indirectly responsible for what happened because he knew that Hideo was a parasite and did nothing. He and Miji climb to the roof of a nearby building so that Hideo doesn't detect them and throw a stone at him. It pierces him through, and Hideo dies. The authorities take his body and study it in laboratories. After this, they conclude that even the smallest fragment of a parasite separated from the rest of the organism will live for some time. Therefore, they need to give society a way to check people for parasites. They decide to introduce a trend of pulling each other's hair when meeting. If it's a parasite hair, it will move. However, this trend turns into tragedy. A tipsy girl decides to pull the hair of her friend, who turns out to be a parasite. She ends up being eaten by him. Since Kana started feeling Izumi, her abilities have intensified. Now she sees the same dream every night, scary monsters attacking her, but Shinichi appears and saves her. In real life, Izumi doesn't show much interest in her, but he considers telling her about Miji. However, Miji is against it and promises to kill Kana if Shinichi slips up. Meanwhile, the number of parasites is increasing. One of them wants to study the capabilities of his body and goes to the Yakuza for that. He kills them all and receives injuries himself but leaves unharmed. Shinichi's relationship with Morano improves. They make peace and start dating. However, from time to time, Shinichi's heart hurts. This happens when he feels strong emotions. In such moments, he becomes human again. Kana sees how in her dreams and in real life, Izumi is reluctant to kiss her. She becomes jealous and calls him to meet. Kana wants to prove that she and Izumi are meant for each other. Otherwise, why does she feel him from a distance? When Izumi set up a new meeting, she decided to come when her telepathic feeling called her. She thought she would meet Shinichi, but she met a monster. He tried to kill her, and Izumi sensed it and came to help, but it was too late. The parasite pierced Kana. Shinichi was so enraged that he killed him with his bare hands. The authorities found the remains of this parasite and took them for research. After Kana and Izumi's deaths, Shinichi tries to lead a normal life. His classmates are surprised by his composure, but Izumi can't be different anymore since a parasite entered his body, changing him. Saitsumi is followed by a man hired by Tamireko. This private detective knows her under another name, Shiro Koromori. He films Shinichi and reports to Reko. A group of parasites led by Hirako entrusted her with surveillance of Izumi because this man interested them a lot. Besides studying human nature and the influence on it, parasites also raise their own child. She recently gave birth, but instead of normal upbringing, she trains the baby. She wants to conduct a series of studies on him. Koromori doesn't see anything strange in Shinichi's behavior, but Reko insists that he continue the investigation. She hires some guys to beat Shinichi up, hoping that he will demonstrate his abilities. At that moment, Shinichi easily handles the hooligans, and Koromori captures it on camera. In the evening, Izumi goes to the building where Kana was killed. He wants to understand if he is still capable of feeling anything. Koromori arrives there too and sees Izumi talking to Miji. When Izumi reveals his parasite nature, Koromori tries to kill the detective, but Shinichi stops him. Injured, Koromori escapes, and Izumi fears that the authorities might come after him. He worries they'll lock him up in laboratories and study him like a lab rat. He wants to find Koromori and figure out who ordered the surveillance on him. After contemplating, Miji changes his mind about killing Koromori. Instead, he wants to use him to find out who's behind the surveillance. They agree to track him down and capture him, but they need help, so they turn to Mamoru, who agrees to assist them. After Miji attacks him, Koromori meets with Reko and tells her everything. He wants an explanation from her, but Reko remains silent. She ends their cooperation despite Koromori's threats. The sight of this wounded man triggers fits of laughter in Reko lately. She has become more and more like a human, learning to laugh and express other emotions. The next day, Izumi and Mamoru lure Koromori into a trap. They take him to a deserted place, and there Shinichi tells him his story. He also reveals Riko's true identity, saying that she's a parasite. Koromori agrees to keep quiet after Miji threatens him. He won't tell anyone about Izumi. After the meeting, Koromori calls Reko, who comes to the meeting late. Reko explains to Izumi that she doesn't want harm to humans. She even eats less human flesh now, along with Mayor Hirakawa and the rest of their group. Reko tries to find a way to live peacefully. Sensing changes in Izumi's body, Reko provokes him into aggression and then leaves, hiding behind her child. She knows Shinichi won't harm the child. Koromori starts to surveil Reko. He and his partner have to split up. He follows Reko, while his partner follows her friend. However, her friend turns out to be a parasite. He planned to have dinner with a girl in the parking lot when he noticed another person. Koromori noticed his partner's disappearance and turned to Izumi for help. They arrived at the parking lot, and Shinichi sensed that a murder had been committed there. While they were in the building, a parasite came to have dinner and saw them. He tried to protect the girl, but the parasite killed his dinner and attacked him. They had a tough fight, as Miji was still asleep, and Izumi couldn't determine if the person in front of him was a parasite or a human. They had to run until Miji woke up. When the parasite caught up with them, they were ready to fight. This creature is called Miki, and one of the parasites inhabiting this body is Goto, who took a back seat, letting Miki deal with Shinichi. It was challenging for Miji to fully understand Miki's fighting tactics, but when he found his weak spot, he struck. Then he led Izumi into the forest, where they would have a better chance of beheading Miki. Eventually, they succeeded. However, Goto takes the place of the head. Now he will control Miji's body. He takes control of himself and places his hands in their proper place. Goto turns out to be too strong of an opponent, and Shinichi runs away. Goto pursues him, but Shinichi manages to get rid of him. Meanwhile, a couple of other parasites kill Koromori's family. Desperate, he goes to the police to report what happened. Moreover, he wants to reveal everything he learned about the parasites during this time. Koromori asks to arrange a meeting with Hiramaya, who is investigating the parasite cases. He writes a report on everything he knows, deliberately omitting Shinichi. After finishing, he leaves. Koromori intends to avenge Ryoko for the death of his relatives, leaving Goto and Miji behind. He calls his father to warn him of the danger within the parasite organization. A schism arises. Some of them consider Tami Ryoko too human and decide to kill her. But it turns out to be not so simple. Despite the fact that there are 3 of them, the parasites cannot quickly kill Tamiya. She deceives them at the construction site and then attacks one of them. Part of her parasite separates and remains in the opponent's body. She begins to take control of the body, then gets rid of it. Tamiya manages to deal with 2 parasites, but one remains, and she personally comes to kill him. She takes back the part of herself that separated and leaves home. She is surprised. A detective, Koromori, sneaks into her apartment and kidnaps her child. He leaves a note indicating the time and place of the meeting. Tamiya takes the child and leaves. The police find Koromori. Before he dies, he managed to describe the appearance of Ryoko, but never mentioned Shinichi. Hiramaya went after Tamiya, and Izumi met Ryoko in the park. She seemed cold and unfeeling to him, but that was not the case. She shared Shinichi's theory about the parasites. Tamiya is sure that these creatures are a product of the human race. Moreover, they need each other. In their conversation, Hiramaya and his men interrupt, making sure that Izumi is not a parasite. He attacks Tamiya. She does not resist until they shoot at her. Ryoko protects the child and then gives him to Shinichi and asks to take care of him. Handing over the child, Tamiya dies. At that moment, something changes. Shinichi starts to feel again. He becomes human again. At the sound of gunfire, Murano rushes in. Only when she sees Shinichi does she realize that he is back to normal. From that moment on, they are together again. When everything was over, Izumi started to interrogate. Hiromaya suspected that there was a parasite in him, so he wanted to expose Shinichi. He brought Youre out of prison. This maniac had abilities that allowed him to recognize parasites. When Izumi was put in front of him, Youre came to life and demanded that Shinichi look him straight in the eye. When Youre was put in front of Izumi, and he demanded to look him in the eye, Izumi got scared. He was sure that Youre would see a parasite in him, but he couldn't. For a moment, the criminal thought that there was something strange about Shinichi before he died. Soon he began to notice parasites that were devouring people. He was caught thanks to these monsters. Youre went to see the corpse left by the parasite, and here he was caught by the police. Despite the fact that the maniac saw nothing unusual in Shinichi, Hiromaya was not reassured. He still believed that this schoolboy was hiding something, but he couldn't prove it, so he let Izumi go. Soon it was decided to cleanse the city hall of parasites. For this purpose, a man named Yamagishi was involved. He will command an operation. Hiromaya advises him not to use Yorogami's abilities to detect parasites. Moreover, he asks Shinichi to help. Hiromaya is sure that without him, the cleanup operation will fail, and Izumi agrees. They, along with Miji, discuss ways to kill Goto, the powerful mutant housing 5 parasites in his body. Then they decided to use fire to scare Goto and weaken him. Therefore, Shinichi advised Hiromaya and Yamagishi to use flamethrowers, but they took his words lightly. After thorough preparation, the city hall was surrounded by special forces. They began to evacuate people in small groups through special equipment, and in the first group, they spotted a parasite. The soldiers killed her. Mayor Hirakawa learned about this and tried to take the parasites to another room, but the soldiers did not allow him. People continued to leave the building, but there was confusion in the crowd, and the special forces, trying to kill the parasite, damaged the system for recognizing these creatures. Youre had to be involved in the work. He pointed out the monsters to the special forces, and they opened fire. In the process, even ordinary people died. Parasites tried to escape, hiding behind the bodies of people, and they were killed. Yamagishi also joined the cleanup. He entered the building and went in search of the mayor and his entourage. Hirakawa, like Goto, did not hurry to leave the building. Goto wanted to study the tactics of combat so that he could better resist the attackers. Yamagishi divided the group with an operative named Katsumata and went away. Youre himself learned to determine where the person and where the parasite were. Youre meets Goto and recoils in horror at what he sees, and Goto kills all the special forces. At the same time, he uses their own weapons, returning all the bullets fired at him without harming himself. Dealing with the soldiers, he goes in search of the remaining troops, and they come to the conference room, where they are awaited by Mayor Hirakawa. He prepared a whole speech for the soldiers and those who sent them. Hirakawa is sure that humanity is causing too much harm to the planet. There are too many people, so their numbers need to be reduced, and parasites are needed for this. They reduced the ventilation unnoticed. However, the speech was not successful. Hirakawa was shot, and it turned out that he was human. At the same time, he collaborated with the parasites and opposed humans. When he was killed, Goto entered the room and dealt with the special forces. Then Youre and Katsumata arrived. The criminal took the weapon and killed the policeman. When Katsumata lost vigilance and turned to the father, Youre escaped. Meanwhile, Miji convinces Shinichi to go home. They are no longer needed here because Yamagishi and his people are using all available weapons, only not the strategy. Yamagishi's weapons cannot eliminate Goto. The parasite drives him to the roof where they engage in open confrontation. Goto decapitates Yamagishi and throws his head down. At this moment, Izumi is also present, but he's exhausted and wounded from earlier encounters, so he simply leaves after witnessing this event. Shinichi starts to fear Goto. He doesn't want to die, but he knows that if he encounters Goto again, he will surely kill him. When Miji falls asleep, Izumi becomes paranoid, seeing Goto everywhere. Because of this, he even gets into a fight with a couple of thugs whom he accidentally bumped into on the street. Izumi begins to realize that he's no better than anyone else if he's so afraid of death, and even considers running away for his own survival. In the evening, he meets Satomi Murano, and she invites him over to her place to spend the night. After that, Shinichi confesses his love for her, feeling better after the ordeal at City Hall. However, Goto tracks Shinichi down. Miji senses him and leads Shinichi away from Izumi. They hijack a car and drive into the city. There, they cause an accident, trying to ram Goto's car, but he survives and attacks them. Miji and Shinichi have to flee into the forest. After brainstorming, Miji suggests splitting up so they can deceive Goto and attack him from both sides. Miji will distract him, and Shinichi will strike from behind. using fire to ignite a stick they took from a stolen car. However, Miji's plan fails. When Izumi attacks Goto, he does lose control momentarily, but Miji fails to sever his head. He understood that Goto would finish them off, so he made Shinichi run away. Before that, Goto managed to injure him, and Izumi didn't want to abandon his friend, but he had no choice but to flee. In the evening, he went to the house of an old woman named Mitsuyo. He wanted to drink some water, but the old lady invited him inside and fed him. She realized that Izumi was in trouble and didn't wish him harm. After dinner, Mitsuyo let Shinichi stay overnight, and in the morning, she took him to work with her. On the way, they passed by a landfill, and Mitsuyo complained that they started dumping garbage near their homes without permission. However, the people couldn't do anything about it. At night, Izumi saw in a dream the particles of Miji trying to interact with him. When he woke up, they even managed to form an eye on his hand but didn't possess consciousness of their own. In the morning, local residents came to Mitsuyo with a complaint that someone killed a monster in the forest, and they suspected Izumi. The friend of the deceased defended Shinichi, but he realized that it was Goto who came to fight him to prevent further casualties. When leaving Mitsuyo's house, the old lady gave him an old machete to defend himself. Shinichi went into the forest and found Goto sleeping. He also needed rest, so at that moment, he could be wounded. Izumi chose the most vulnerable spot in his opinion and struck the machete into Goto's neck. Goto woke up and attacked Shinichi. Goto developed a new plan and he needed to pierce his opponent with a wooden stake to damage his internal organs. However, this attack failed, and Goto threw Shinichi into the landfill. Here, he realized that he could strike the Parasyte with an iron rod found in the garbage pile. After delivering this blow, Izumi fled, but Goto found him. Parts of his body belonging to other Parasytes began to rebel against him, but Goto managed to subdue them. He prepared to attack Shinichi, who calmly waited for his death. However, when Goto attacked, Izumi defended himself with what remained of his right hand. At that moment, Miji joined him. Throughout this time, Miji had been inside Goto, but thanks to the blow with the iron rod, he managed to detach himself from Goto's body. A toxin was introduced into Goto's body during the blow, causing him to lose control over the other Parasytes. In this state, he was much easier to defeat. Miji made a deal with him, but then he noticed how Goto was trying to regenerate his body. Shinichi didn't allow him to do that and finished off the Parasyte using the machete. Mitsuyo then took him back to her home, and the old lady realized that Shinichi had won against the Parasyte. Shinichi returned to his normal life, finished school, and tried to enter university, but he couldn't. Now he was preparing to take the entrance exams again. One day, Miji informed him that he had to go into a long hibernation, and perhaps he would never manifest again. However, Shinichi would regain his right hand in its previous form. The Parasytes began to show themselves less. Izumi no longer heard about half-eaten people or other strange murders, or maybe such incidents were drowned out by a large number of other crimes. Shinichi and Satomi continued to meet early, once when they were walking around the city, and Izumi noticed that they were being followed by Miji. He grabbed Murano and dragged her onto the roof of a building. Shinichi rushed to her aid, but when he tried to save her, Miji threw Satomi off the roof, and Izumi managed to disable the enemy in time. But he felt that he had missed Satomi at that moment. In this moment of need, Miji came to his aid and grabbed the girl at the last moment, and Shinichi dragged her up.